fifth talk to the same group on December 19th, 1930. I began as follows. Before questioning you according to the usage established by me in order to better orient myself for giving further indications, as now, for example, questioning you about why and how, as a result of your spare time reflections during the past week, you have elucidated and understood my indications concerning the first exercise which I recommended at the third meeting for the purpose of preparing in your common presences fertile soil for the possibility of intentionally composing data for the impulses sacred for man. I find it necessary to indicate to you two other independent exercises which were in the general program of the Institute founded by me, but which belong to quite a different series of exercises, which were then also for a definite category of pupils. One of the what are called assisting means for acquiring one's own real I. Besides these exercises, of which I now speak, and also the information about them, into which I now wish to initiate you, being for you a really good means for this aim, they will help you firstly to apprehend and understand many details of the significance and sense of the first of the 7 what are called cardinal exercises I mentioned. And secondly, you will, thanks to this information, learn by the way of 2 definite notions which from the dawn of centuries among all categories of initiated persons on the earth have been considered and are at the present time considered secret, and an acquaintance with which, for the average man, can, according to the convictions of these initiates, even prove ruinous. You must here know that on the earth, in almost all epochs, the persons who deserved to become genuine initiates were divided into 3 categories. The initiates belonging to the first category were those who, thanks to their intentional sufferings and conscious labors, attained a high gradation of what is called being, and for this they acquired the title saint. To the second category belonged those who, thanks to the same factors, acquired a great deal of all kinds of information, and to their names was added the title learned. And to the third category, those who by means of again the same factors attained being, and also enlightened themselves concerning a great number of objective truths, and to their names were added the title sage. The first of the aforementioned secrets is that, as a means for self-perfecting, a man can use a certain property which is in his psyche, and which is even of a very negative character. This property can serve as an aid to self-perfecting, and exists in people in general, particularly in contemporary people, and especially in you, and is none other than that which I have many times condemned, and which people themselves consider an unworthy manifestation for a man who has reached responsible age. Of course, in this respect, also excluding themselves, and it is called self-deception. Such an, at first glance, illogicality, and deduction not corresponding to any human sane reasoning, namely that such a property unbecoming to the psyche of a man of adult age can consciously be made use of for such an immeasurably high aim, is obtained owing to the fact that the cognizance of truths concerning the possibilities of self-perfection and the real forming in oneself of what is required for this must proceed not in the ordinary consciousness of a man, which for the given case has almost no significance, but in what is called the subconscious. And since, thanks to all kinds of accidents ensuing from the various abnormalities of our ordinary life, it has become impossible for a man, particularly for a contemporary man, to take in anything at all, and so to say, digest it directly with his subconsciousness. Therefore, it is necessary for him, as has in the course of many centuries been experimentally proven by persons of pure reason, to use a special means for inculcating in his subconsciousness some reasonable indication, accidentally grasped by his ordinary consciousness, and not contradictory to his instinct. And this can be done only by means of this self-deceptive imaginativeness inherent in him. If you have understood without any doubt what you must do, and how, and fully hope at some time to attain this in reality, you must at the beginning often imagine, but imagine only, that this is already present in you. This is necessary chiefly in order that the consciousness forming in oneself during an active state should continue also during a passive state. For the correct understanding of the significance of this first assisting exercise, it is first of all necessary to know that when a normal man, that is, a man who already has his real I, his will, and all the other properties of a real man, pronounces aloud or to himself the words, I am, then there always proceeds in him, in his, as it is called, solar plexus, a, so to say, reverberation. That is, something like a vibration, a feeling, or something of the sort. This kind of reverberation can proceed also in other parts of his body in general, but only on the condition that when pronouncing these words, his attention is intentionally concentrated on them. If the ordinary man, not having as yet in himself data for the natural reverberation, but knowing of the existence of this fact, will, with conscious striving for the formation in himself of the genuine data which should be in the common presence of a real man, correctly and frequently pronounce these same and for him as yet empty words, and will imagine that this same reverberation proceeds in him. He may, thereby, ultimately through frequent repetition, gradually acquire in himself a, so to say, theoretical beginning for the possibility of a real practical forming in himself of these data. He who is exercising himself with this must at the beginning, when pronouncing the words I am, imagine that this same reverberation is already proceeding in his solar plexus. Here, by the way, it is curious to notice that as a result of the intentional concentration of this reverberation on any part of his body, a man can stop any disharmony which has arisen in this said part of the body. That is to say, he can, for example, cure his headache by concentrating the reverberation on that part of the head where he has the sensation of pain. At the beginning, it is necessary to pronounce the words, I am, very often, and to try, always, not to forget to have the said reverberation in one's solar plexus. Without this, even if only imagined experiencing of the reverberation, the pronouncing aloud or to oneself of the words, I am, will have no significance at all. The result of the pronouncing of them without this reverberation will be the same as that which is obtained from the automatic associative mentation of man, namely, an increase of that in the atmosphere of our planet from our perception of which, and from its blending with our second food, there arises in us an irresistible urge to destroy the various tempos of our ordinary life, somehow established through centuries. This second exercise, as I've already said, is only preparatory. And when you have acquired the knack, as it were, of experiencing this process imagined in yourself, only then will I give you further definite real indications for the actualization in yourself of real results. First of all, concentrate the greater part of your attention on the words themselves. I am. And the lesser part, concentrate on the solar plexus, and the reverberation should gradually proceed of itself. At first it is necessary to acquire only, so to say, the taste of these impulses, which you have not as yet in you, and which for the present you may designate merely by the words, I am, I can, I wish, I am, I can, I am can, I am, I wish, I am wish. In concluding my elucidations of this assisting exercise, I will once more repeat, but in another formulation, what I have already said. If I am, only then I can. If I can, only then do I deserve and have the objective right to wish. Without the ability to can, there is no possibility of having anything. No, nor the right to it. First, we must assimilate these expressions as external designations of these impulses in order ultimately to have the impulses themselves. If you several times experience merely the sensation of what I have just called the taste of these impulses sacred for man, you will then already be indeed fortunate, because you will then feel the reality of the possibility of sometime acquiring in your presence data for these real divine impulses proper only to man. And on these divine impulses there is based for humanity the entire sense of everything existing in the universe, beginning from the atom and ending with everything existing as a whole, and among other things, even your dollars. For an all-around assimilation of both these assisting, or as they might otherwise be called, helping exercises, for the mastering of the chief exercise, I now, at the very beginning of the formation of this new group, composed of various persons pursuing one and the same aim, find it necessary to warn you of an indispensable condition for the successful attainment of this common aim. And that is in your mutual relations to be sincere. The unconditional requirement of such sincerity among all kinds of other conditions existed as it happened to become known to me from various authentic sources among people of all past times and of every degree of intellectuality, whenever they gathered together for the collective attainment of some common aim. In my opinion, it is only by fulfilling this condition for the given proposed collective work that it is possible to attain a real result in this aim, which one has set oneself, and which has already become for contemporary people almost impossible. Each of you having become an equal rights participant in this group, newly formed for the attainment of one and the same, so to say, ideal, must always struggle with such impulses, inevitably arising in you and unworthy of man, as self-love, pride, conceit, and so on, and not be ashamed to be sincere in your answers concerning your observations and constatations on the exercises recommended by me. Any information expressed by any of you relating to the elucidation of the various details of this first exercise, which is for all of you at the present moment the center of gravity, can be, in the collective work, of great value in helping one another. In the present case, you must not be afraid of being sincere among yourselves. Being occupied with the solution of questions concerning this common great aim, each of you must always cognize and instinctively feel that you are all in a certain respect similar to each other, and that the well-being of one of you depends on the well-being of the others. No one of you separately is capable of doing anything real at all. Therefore, even for the sake of only an egoistic aim, help one another in this newly formed group, which might also be called a brotherhood. The more sincere you are with one another, the more useful you will be to one another. Of course, be sincere only here in the group, and in questions concerning the common aim. Sincerity with everyone, in general, is a weakness, slavery, and even a sign of hysteria. Although the normal man must be able to be sincere, yet he must also know when, where, and for what purpose it is necessary to be sincere. And in the present case, to be sincere is desirable. Therefore, without restraint, speak of all the results attained by you from doing this kind of exercise. I consider it necessary, before explaining these details, again to say a little about that specific totality of the results from the general functioning in the human psyche of what is called attention. Although, in the normal man, this attention in the passive state is also a something of proportionately blended results of the corresponding actions of all the three independent automized parts in his whole individuality, and is always one whole. Yet, in an active state, such a man can consciously concentrate this whole attention of his on anything, either on some part of his common presence or on something outside him, in such a, so to say, collectiveness, that all the associations automatically proceeding in him, which, being law-conformable results of the general functioning of his organism, must always, as long as he breathes, inevitably proceed, will totally cease to hinder him. Here it might as well be remarked that according to authentic information which has reached us from the very ancient past, it is clearly stated that it was very definitely proved by learned persons then that these automatically flowing associations never cease while a man lives, and in certain people still continue to proceed after death for several days by momentum. In speaking of these associations which automatically flow in man, I might as well, by the way, so to say, illuminatingly clarify yet another, at first glance, insignificant aspect of the phenomenal stupidity of people who believe and ascribe significance to all their foolish dreams. When a man really sleeps normally, his attention, by the quality of which the, so to say, gradation of the difference between the waking state and sleep is conditioned, also sleeps. That is to say, his attention is, according to the law-conformable inherencies in him, stored up with corresponding force for the subsequent necessary intensive manifestations. But when, owing to some disharmony in the general functioning of a man's organism, most often to a non-normal expenditure in his waking state of the law-conformably accumulated energy, this part of the general psyche of his waking state is not capable of normally actualizing itself during sleep. Then, from the associations flowing in him, constated with his attention, so to say, a bit here and a bit there, these famous dreams are obtained. That is to say, human foolishness. Secondly, a normal man can intentionally divide his whole attention, of which I have already spoken, into 2 or even 3 separate parts, and concentrate each of these on various independent objects inside or outside himself. It will be very useful, in my opinion, for the productivity of the further work in this newly formed group of ours, if now, just before explaining to you the procedure of this second assisting exercise, I tell you also that when I had drawn up the detailed plan for my institute mentioned here many times, I was then already convinced of the impossibility of exactly explaining and fully formulating in words the various fine points of the procedures of any intentional experiencings and exercises for the purpose of self-perfection. And knowing at the same time of the existence among our remote ancestors of a special method, which was then called the principle of illustrative inculcation, for the purpose of better taking in new information, I therefore introduced this method also in the general program, and frequently employed it in certain circumstances, and now, in view of the fact that I intend, after the work has begun in this newly formed group of followers of my ideas, also to employ this method, I therefore consider it expedient and opportune For the elucidations of the procedure of this second assisting exercise, to keep partly to this, in my opinion, only true and useful method for such cases. Well then, I am now sitting among you, as you see, and although I am looking at Mr. L, yet I am intentionally directing all my attention, which you are not able to see, on my foot, and consequently any manifestation Mr. L produces within the field of my vision, I see only automatically. My attention, which at the present moment is one whole, being in another place. This whole attention of mine I now intentionally divide into two equal parts. The first half I consciously direct to the uninterrupted constatation and continuous sensing of the process proceeding in me of my breathing. By means of this part of my attention, I definitely feel that something takes place in me with the air I breathe. I first clearly feel that when I breathe in the air, the greater part, passing through my lungs, goes out again, and the lesser part remains and, as it were, settles there. And then I feel that this settled part is gradually penetrating inward and is, as it were, spreading through my whole organism. In consequence of the fact that only a part of my attention is occupied with the observation of the process of breathing proceeding in me, all the mental feeling and reflex associations automatically flowing in my common presence still continue to be noticed by the free part of my attention, and hinder that first part of my attention intentionally directed upon a definite object, but already to a much lesser extent. Now I direct the second half of my attention to my head brain, for the purpose of observing and possibly constating any process proceeding in it. And I am beginning to feel in it, from the totality of automatically flowing associations, the arising of something very fine, almost imperceptible to me. I do not know just what this is, nor do I wish to know, but I definitely constate, feel, and sense that this is some definite something arising from the process automatically proceeding in my head brain of associations of previously consciously perceived impressions. While this second half of my attention is occupied with the aforesaid, the first half continues all the time uninterruptedly to watch, with so to say concentrated interest, the result proceeding from the process of my breathing. I now consciously direct this second half of my attention and, uninterruptedly remembering the whole of myself, I aid this something arising in my head brain to flow directly into my solar plexus. I feel how it flows. I no longer notice any automatic associations proceeding in me. Having finished this, so to say, monologue of mine, I continued to tell them, now, in the usual way, the following. In spite of the fact that I have done this exercise just now among you for the purpose of illustratively elucidating its details to you, and have in consequence done it under conditions not corresponding to the possibility of accumulating to the full in my common presence the entire beneficial result of this exercise. Nevertheless, I now begin, at the present moment, to feel incomparably better than before beginning this demonstration, explanation. Owing to my solar plexus, intentionally and directly taking in the law-conformable results of the air I was breathing, and the results arising in my head brain of the previously consciously perceived impressions, I feel much more fully that I am, I can, and I can wish. But you, if you please, do not get too enthusiastic and too animated about my state, which you vividly sense, and which you also desire to acquire. This, for the time being, cannot happen with any of you. From this exercise of mine, which I had to do here among you for the purpose of elucidation, there has been obtained in my common presence a result realistically sensed by all of you, because I already have a fully denned subjective I, and the whole totality composing it is already more or less adapted for the results of corresponding impressions and law-conformable regulating. And therefore this I of mine absorbs this law-conformable food proper to it more intensively. You, for the time being, must not expect such a definite result from your intentional repetitions of this same exercise. Do not, for the time being, do this exercise in order to be strong. This also is for you only preparation for at some time having your own I, and at the same time for constating with indubitable certitude those two real sources from which this I can arise. Now, without philosophizing and without your, for you, maleficent discussions, try, first of all, to understand the totality of all that I have said today, and then do the exercise for yourself, but without any hope or expectation of any definite results.